Welcome back to the neighborhood. My name is Dylan,
And I'm Andrew.
and today we'll be revisiting our rankings of the Fromsoftware Soulslikes. One of our first videos when we started this channel was us ranking our favorite Fromsoftware games, but this was before Elden Ring came out. So between that and revisiting their catalog for Dark Souls month over on our podcast, it seemed like a good time to go in and update our lists.
Now, we're only going to be ranking the Souls-like games, not Kingsfield, Armored Core, or that random Monster Hunter game for the 3DS. The Souls-likes, though, are what most people think of when they think of FromSoft, and are the ones we have the most experience with.
Keep in mind that these are our personal rankings, so yours may differ, but let's jump into our lists.
Number 7. My number 7 is Dark Souls. This game is the most aged out of the bunch now that Demon's Souls has an incredible remake. Even with the remaster, it still feels dated and clunky. It isn't unplayable by any means, but it definitely shows its age. The interconnectivity of the world is something that is still impressive to this day, and worth experiencing. I really appreciate Dark Souls as a blueprint for what was to come from FromSoft, but the vague and unintuitive mechanics and haha gotcha level design are tough to go back to with so many modern offerings from the studio. I had a good time playing through Dark Souls, but it is the From game that I'm the least likely to go back and play.
My number 7 is Sekiro. Now, I do appreciate Sekiro as a game and can objectively see that it is an awesome game. It has a cool setting, the combat feels quick and visceral, the movement around the environment is a lot of fun, and it has one of the least convoluted stories of all of FromSoftware's games. But I frequently found myself frustrated when it came to the bosses of the game. I could maneuver through the levels and fight regular enemies just fine, but at a certain point, the bosses became tedious. The combat that I enjoyed so much throughout the level became a test of patience, as I blocked and deflected the boss's 30-hit combo so that I could get in one or two quick attacks before having to block another combo. There is not much room for error, especially late in the game, meaning that whittling away the boss's health often grew into an annoying chore, as I knew what to do and how to beat the boss, but just one or two missed deflections spelled the end of my attempt. Because of that, it winds up at the bottom of my list.
Number 6. My number 6 is Demon's Souls. I've only played the remake, but I had a great time with it. I love how it looks and the animations of the main character. The environments are also some of the best we've had in a FromSoft game. Outside of the visuals and updates, the gameplay holds up, and the segmented areas, while not as impressive as a connected world, were still fun to explore and fight my way through. Some of the gimmick bosses haven't aged well, and the difficulty is a bit all over the place, but if you enjoy From's other games, you're sure to have a good time with this one as well.
My number 6 is also Demon's Souls. I haven't actually beaten this game, as I don't own a PlayStation 5, but I have tried it out on my co-host Andrew's console. What I played felt familiar, and I could definitely see a lot of DNA that went on to become some of my favorite games of all time. While I didn't get to fully mess around with some of the systems, like the world tendency, I thought those were cool ideas. It's one that I look forward to playing in full when I eventually pick it up on PlayStation 5, and could even see moving up the ranks, but for now, all I know is that I enjoyed what I played way more than I've enjoyed Sekiro.
Number 5. My number 5 is Dark Souls 2. I have nostalgia for this entry in the series, since it was the first one I really experienced as a solo player. I also like the art design and the world of Dark Souls 2. That being said, the difficulty is a bit front-loaded, and there are many valid criticisms of the game's level design and experimental systems. But I think once you gain some momentum in Dark Souls 2, it is a very rewarding experience, and one that is worthy to be in this list of games.
My number 5 is Dark Souls. The first game can feel a bit dated now, 13 years after it came out, but playing it around release was like nothing I had really experienced. In my opinion, the exploration and sense of discovery were at its peak in Dark Souls 1. The world is so interconnected and has little touches like being able to see places you'll wind up going much later in the game from the outset. Some of the systems feel old in comparison to some of the more modern games. The bosses are much simpler than later entries in the series, and even the remaster can look a bit ugly, but I still love this game. Number 4. Both of our number 4s are Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is a fantastic game. I personally think it's the best place to start if you're wanting to get into the Dark Souls series. It has a lot of quality of life features that I find myself missing when I play the older games. Plus, it looks amazing. Some of my favorite skyboxes in the series come from this game. I do find myself missing the exploration, as this game is much more linear than many of Fromsoftware's other games, but sometimes I'm in the mood for something a little bit more confined. To me, it feels very similar to Elden Ring, just without the dedicated jump button and open world. If I was making this list objectively, this game might be a little bit higher, but everything from here on out is there for subjective reasons, so they beat out this game.
I recently replayed Dark Souls 3, and it really grew on me. The middle of the game kind of lags a bit, but it begins and ends extremely strong. Diving into the lore of not only the base game but also the DLC, I found myself getting invested in the story of the whole series and the way it comes to a conclusion in this game. There are still some pain points, and I think Dark Souls as a series has the most screw you kind of traps and enemy encounters, but for the most part, I loved exploring this world. The bosses were a huge step up from all of their previous games on my list so far as well. FromSoft is now known for their tough but fair boss fights, but that didn't really become the norm until Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, in my opinion. Number 3. My number 3 is Sekiro. Sekiro is FromSoft's attempt at a more action-focused game in the vein of Tenchu. The traditional leveling system and character builds are gone. You play as the wolf, and you fight with his sword, prosthesis weapon, and other items. This was a drawback from some who prefer the choices that FromSoft allows in their other games. In Sekiro, you either get good at the game and how it is meant to be played, or you don't. There's very little player choice in that matter. I personally love the game and its combat system. Yes, there was a fairly steep learning curve, but I was motivated to figure it out. And once I did, I had a ton of fun being a shinobi and fighting my way through the magical world of Sekiro. I understand that this game may not click with everyone, and that it can be unforgiving. But if you do click with it, you're in for a special experience.
My number 3 is Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 was my first Dark Souls game, and so it will always have a special place in my heart. It changed up a lot, from losing a chunk of health in addition to your souls when you die, to being able to power stance 2 similar weapons. It was a big shakeup. I got it at midnight the day it came out, and got to experience the wonder of going through a FromSoftware game before everything had been discovered and written about in guides on every wiki. To me, Dark Souls 2 has the most options to make the game easier on yourself if you can make it past the first few hours. Between enemies having limited respawns and literally being able to give yourself more invincibility in your dodges. The DLCs can be a nightmare, but the base game was so good I immediately went into several New Game Plus runs after beating it. Something I had never done before, so it earns its 3rd place spot on my list. Number 2. Both of our number 2s are Elden Ring. For me, this game is a masterpiece. I know it's not like I was the only one who was looking forward to it when it came out, but I'm amazed that it had that level of hype and still lived up to every bit of it, in my opinion. Stepping out into the lands between for the first time and seeing the world laid out before me with so many possible directions to go scratches my exploration itch every time. I played through this game several times and am in the process of another playthrough, and I am still discovering new things that I've missed, and I love that about this game. It really feels like the culmination of all of the best, and maybe a few of the worst, parts of FromSoftware's other games, and has solidly earned itself a spot as one of my favorite games of all time.
I agree with everything Dylan said. Everything from the music, Visuals, lore, bosses, and especially the open world make this a truly unique experience. It's FromSoft firing on all cylinders, and they knocked it out of the park. This is the game you should start with if you want to get into Soulslikes or From's games. There are so many ways that it helps the player overcome the challenges in their path, ways that previous titles did not offer. Elden Ring is a truly special experience that I think everyone should try. Number 1. We both put Bloodborne at number 1. At this point, you probably saw that coming. Although, it is in a close race with Elden Ring. This was the game that introduced me to the Souls-like genre and taught me how special it is. Since I beat Bloodborne, I've had a craving for Souls-like games that I can never seem to fully satisfy. Outside of my personal attachment to this game, the Lovecraftian cosmic horror story and the Victorian setting are executed perfectly, and the combat is some of my favorite in any game. Bloodborne is my second favorite game of all time, so it makes sense that it would rank at the top of this list. The experience I had playing it was truly special, and it opened up a whole new genre of video games for me to play and enjoy.
I am personally a big fan of cosmic horror, so when FromSoft leans into that theme, it's the best of both worlds for me. This game checks so many boxes that it can feel like it was tailor-made just for me, with the only evidence that it wasn't being that it's PlayStation exclusive. But despite that, it has claimed the top spot as my favorite game from FromSoft, and it is probably in my top 10 games of all time.
So those are our lists. What do yours look like? Let us know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to be notified when a new one goes live.
If you want to hear us talk way more about why we rank these games the way that we did, or hear us go in depth on each Dark Souls game, or other gaming topics, check out Your Friendly Neighborhood Gamers wherever you get your podcasts.
With that, we'll leave you with a reminder to stay friendly, gamers.